Welcome to the Sage Advice Podcast, transforming the way people think and work so their organizations can thrive. Well, hi everyone, and welcome to our podcast. I'm Ed Kless, and today's episode is cut from another podcast of which I am the co-host, The Soul of Enterprise, which is also sponsored by Sage. The Soul of Enterprise is dedicated to belief that business has a spiritual, though not necessarily religious, component. I hope you enjoy this excerpt. If you do, please visit www.thesoulofenterprise.com for more.
I want to earn profits. And the logic of capitalism is that the pursuit of profits over the long term redounds to the benefit of the public because I produce consumer surplus. And so that's a technical economics word that we all recognize. The benefit of capitalism is that I produce things that have a big difference between what I would pay for them and what I have to pay for them. So it seems like Apple makes a lot of profits from selling phones. But a lot of people would pay $2,000. Some psychos would pay $4,000. I don't get it. But a lot of people would pay a lot for the newest Apple iPhone. They'll stand in line and then spend $4,000 for it. So those are the benefits. They're willing to pay $4,000. They have to pay $900. If you add that up across all of the different people who buy stuff. So in one of the essays in the book, I asked the question, what if you had to buy a ticket to go to Costco? Well, you have to pay a little bit, but if you had to pay the amount that it's actually worth to you, what would it be worth to buy a ticket to Walmart? I'd probably pay $2,000 to get into Walmart if that was the only place where I could buy stuff. So your ticket to capitalism is free. You get all of these benefits. The pursuit of profits drives entrepreneurs and producers to find a way to make these things available to you. Sometimes I see something that I didn't even know exist, and now I have to have it. Except that also inherent in the logic of capitalism is the fact that I can seek favors from the government. I can seek favorable treatment, favorable regulation, and in many cases, outright subsidies. Those are just as profitable, but they don't produce any of the benefits. Well, that's terrible because the logic of capitalism means that the pursuit of accounting profits is going to divert people away from making things that people want to buy to basically selling it to Congress and then using tax law to benefit from it. So that's what I call cronyism. I think capitalism is not sustainable. And given that you're right about the definition, that means that we're not investing in the plant and equipment and the competitiveness, frankly, that we face against other countries, because other countries are still investing in plant and equipment and research. We're eating our seed corn. We're giving subsidies to companies. We're bailing them out. And you can't blame those companies. You can't blame a dog for eating out of the garbage. It's what dogs do. But we can put the garbage someplace the dogs can't get it.
You call it the road to cronyism. And do you see any path off that road if we stick with democracy?
There's a lot of turnarounds. So the analogy that I make, people might recognize that in 1944, Friedrich Hayek wrote a book called The Road to Serfdom. And he didn't say that it was necessarily true that any attempt to manipulate or manage prices would lead to a result where we got to socialism. But there's a tendency. If you start to manage price, then it distorts parts of the economy, and then you have to regulate another part of the economy, and there's a cascade. I think that the road to cronyism works the same way. There's a bunch of turnarounds. There's a bunch of places you can slow down and take a break. But by and large, we're heading in that direction. There is one good thing, and that is I think that there is a life cycle for companies. So if you look at Microsoft for years kind of bragged they didn't have a single lobbyist. Now they have an entire building on K Street in Washington. So as a firm, as an industry matures, you start to get to a situation where you invest, and I'm using invest with air quotes, which makes for great radio, I realize, but we're investing in things that are profitable but are not producing anything for the future. But we have a lot of new companies. Uber doesn't do much lobbying. They may have to. A lot of the sharing economy companies, a lot of the companies that are active in the blockchain space, they're making too much money by producing value. At some point, it becomes harder to produce value, and then you turn towards the government to give you value that is taken at gunpoint from taxpayers. So I don't really think that there's a way of stopping it. However, as long as we have enough permissionless innovation, as long as we have enough new creative energy from entrepreneurs making new products and new firms, then it'll take a decade or more for those new firms to turn to cronyism. So as long as the economy's dynamic, the short answer, which I should have started with, is as long as the economy's dynamic, we're okay. I'm worried that we're going to enter an Elizabeth Warren kind of era. She won't be president, but she may be in charge of regulation. That viewpoint may be in charge of regulation, where we're more concerned about control of the economy than we are the dynamism of the economy.
Right now, it was brilliant. You anticipated my next question, because you said the most important concept in political economy is permissionless innovation. I thought that was a pretty profound statement, because we've had Adam Thierer on, and he wrote that book, Permissionless, and he also wrote another one called Evasive Entrepreneurs, the Ubers of the world, and they go around the regulation. So you're somewhat optimistic as long as we have that constant dynamism, that constant creative destruction and entrepreneurs, that we can overcome the road to cronyism.
James C. Scott, the sociologist, anthropologist at Yale University, is an amazing anarchist sort of turn. So he has a famous book, The Art of Not Being Governed, and then another one called Seeing Like a State. And so he talks about these tribes that have moved to the mountains of Southeast Asia, and they've never been governed. There's a basic human tendency to think, I'm going to try to escape. And it's not everybody, but the people who are not willing to live by the strictures of others. It's a basic human tendency. And entrepreneurs tend to be that sort of people. They're not willing to accept things as they are. Entrepreneurship, Israel Kirzner said, was an awareness that allows you to see around the corner. Now, you can't literally see around the corner, but you can imagine a world different than it is. People who have that kind of imagination and that sort of creative energy are really unwilling to accept the need for, and it's not need, the requirement, the government requirement, that I have to go and get somebody else's permission before I can create this thing that I want to. So what we see is working in parallel. It's always kind of an arms race. We see a movement towards more and more government control and more ways around government control at the same time. So I am actually optimistic, because the ability to be an entrepreneur, I can create an app and I can put it up on an app store. I can live in Afghanistan. I can live in a small town in South America. I can be working on a feature phone, but I know enough to program. I write the app, I put it up, and it enables peer-to-peer transactions between two people in the developed world. They've never met me. They don't need to know me. So we have more of an opportunity for permissionless innovation than we ever have, as long as we can get the government to keep its mitts off these platforms that allow us to sell new apps.
For more sage advice, visit and subscribe at sageadvicepodcast.com.